Hi, Dr. Rick with the Relate Well Institute. Thanks for taking some time to join us. All right, you ever wonder why it is people experiencing things in their past, particularly in childhood, and they're still struggling at age 20, 30, 40, 50 years later? A lot of people think it's because of the things that happened to them, the event itself. You know, there are a lot of things that people go through in life that are traumatic and painful. I grew up, those who've watched my videos before, some of our videos, have heard my story, my testimony. Growing up in a broken home where there's divorce, my father got custody of us kids. I was raised by my dad and my stepmom. I was around 10 or 11. My dad bought a cow prod. Used to shock us. My little brother got the worst of the violence. My dad had these things called sessions. My little brother got the sessions. I never got one, but I did hear them. I asked Paul years later, what did Dad do to you there? And he told me he hit him with his fist. You see, my dad was abused by his dad. My dad struggled with his own pain and his own hurt that was basically played out on us. Why did he not change? Why is it people still live out issues from the past when that thing that happened already happened? Some people believe it's because of the event. If that's true, you can't heal. But why do people heal from some events and some people don't? That's what we're going to tackle today. That's the question we want to answer. We call this lecture, What Happened? End Your Story. But it starts out philosophical. So we got to do the philosophy piece to understand all of it. So if you like philosophy, you'll enjoy this. If you don't, hang in there with me. You'll learn something you didn't know that will make an impact in your life and how you live your life in the present fully. So let's take a look at the philosophy side of it. Okay, so I said we're going to start out philosophically. So here we are. We're going to draw this out, all right? So hang with me. Stay teachable. Keep an open mind. Let's think this through for a minute. All right, so here's a little philosophy lesson. Let's say this line represents a life, all right? Back here in time is when you're born, and out here in time is when you die. So on this timeline, past, present, here in time is when you're born, there is when you die. And people actually say that life is between birth and death. I'm going to prove to you it isn't. Because your life is not life. Life is a noun. Life is an entity in itself. Your life is just your life. If your life was life, then when you die, all life would stop. But all life doesn't stop when you die. So we can ask a question now, where does life happen? Where does life happen? Not your life. Where does life as an entity happen? So we can ask, where does it happen? And by asking the where question, the answer is simple. It happens everywhere. Literally everywhere. Wherever you go, life already is. So we can answer the question, well, life is everywhere. But then the second part, so you notice the comma there, the second part is, well, it is everywhere, but where everywhere as it relates to our person, as it relates to your body? Where is it as it relates to yourself, right? And the answer is, well, it's outside of you. It's outside of you, all right? So it's outside of me. You tell I'm terrible spelling, right? And it's all around me. In other words, if you ask me, where does life happen? We would say, well, it's everywhere, but it's outside of me and it's all around me because all living things exist in life. Life isn't in here. Your life is in here, but your life isn't life. Life is out here. We exist in it. So if you think about it, in the moment in time when you were conceived, you entered into life. And on the day that we die, in the moment in time that we die, we leave life. Every living thing exists in life. So life is actually out here. I exist in it. And wherever you go, life already is because you actually live in life. Now, this is very important. Most people don't live, listen to how I word this, most people don't live their life in life. Most people don't live their life in life. Most people live their life in their head, watching life, judging and criticizing it. That's how most people live. To live life out here is a very different way than living in your head, judging and criticizing. We'll come back to that in a minute. Life also happens in time. This is the when question. Now we can ask the question, when does life happen? And the answer is moment by moment by moment by moment by moment. Because life happens, time happens in moments, right? In a sense, time works this way. It comes from the future into the present. It immediately goes into the past. So think about this now. Listen to the language. Every time I make this hand movement in life and in time, that hand movement that I'm making right now in life and time, it just went into the past. It can't be undone. It can't be stopped. It can't be fixed. It is done. When you release an arrow in life and time, it is released. Cannot undo it. It's impossible. So now we can ask the question, why do people struggle with things that happened to them in life and time, back there in the past? Why are you still struggling 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, when what happened's already happened? You see, people go, well, the reason people struggle with things that happened to them is because of what happened, the event itself. You see, way back here in life and time, on a particular day, hour, minute, second, millisecond, I was conceived. And out there in the future, on a particular day, hour, minute, second, millisecond, I leave life. Every day, things happen in life and in time, moment by moment by moment by moment by moment. So why do people still struggle with things that happened to them back there in life and time, these things that happen? We'll call each of those an event. Why do people still struggle with the things that happened to them at age 20, age 30, age 40, age 50, but when what happened's already happened? Most people say, well, it's because of the event itself. So the event is the reason you struggle. Now, let me say this as a disclaimer. I am not saying that being sexually abused or physically abused, we got that in our home, right? I'm not saying those things aren't bad, and I'm not saying they don't have an effect. What I am challenging is, why is it that you still struggle with it? People go, well, it's because of what happened. Well, if it is true that the reason you struggle is because of the event itself, then you must admit you could never heal. Unless you get a flux capacitor, put it on the back of a DeLorean, and shoot down the street and go into the past. That was just a movie called Back to the Future. And think about it this way. If the reason that you still struggle is the event itself, then you have to logically admit you could never heal unless you have a flux capacitor. And if the event is the reason you can't heal, now that begs the question, how come some people heal from events and some people don't? Something else is at play. And that's the conversation we're about to jump into. So what we just learned from our little philosophy lesson is that everything happens in life and in time, moment by moment by moment and by moment. And we've also learned that some people heal from events and some people don't. So we can't say that the event itself is the reason people don't heal. Something else is at play. Well, what is it? It has to do with your brain and how it was designed to function. You see, the brain, the human brain, is a meaning-making machine. Right now, your brain is attaching meaning to me. It's attaching meaning to me based on its level of knowledge of me, all right? It's normal. It's what the brain does. And so way back there in life and in time, when events took place, things happened to us, your brain was trying to make sense of it. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it mean? Our brains do that as adults today. It will always do that because the brain requires context. Here's the problem. Human development. Prior to age around 13, children's brains don't have the ability to think abstract. Children's brains think what is called egocentric. Ego-centered. In other words, children's brain, as it experiences what's happening around it in life and time, their brain is going to make an assumption that when that thing happened to me out here in life and time, I caused it. I'm the one that made that happen. That person did that to me because I was bad. That man molested me because I did something. Dad used to beat me because I'm bad. The child's brain is creating meaning. We call those meaning stories. So whenever an event took place in a child's life, the brain At 1/200th of a second, folks, it creates a story about the event. But prior to age 12 and 13, the stories are all in the phrase of I or I'm. Example, when I grew up, I was born in Miami, 1961, and my dad and my stepmother raised me. I think she came in my life as my mother at around, I think I was 3 or 4. And my dad decided boys are going to play baseball. I was around 8 or 9. I remember my first year playing baseball. I remember our team. We were the Sightland Supers. I think Sightland was a plumbing company that sponsored us. We had orange uniforms. My first year playing baseball, folks, get this. My first year playing baseball, I, Dr. Rick Marks, had a perfect batting record. It was unheard of back in those days. You're right. I never hit the ball once. That's perfect. But here's what nobody knew. When I would get up to bat, I would stand as a little boy in the position of the batter, and I was looking at the pitcher, but I wasn't paying attention to a pitcher. It was a voice back here behind me that would say things like, don't you blankety blank mess up. You better be like the other boys. That was my dad. And then when I would hear that, because I was paying attention to that, I'd strike out every time. That's just an event. That's all that was. An event in time. But what I didn't know was, since a brain is a meaning-making machine, and children's brain think what? Egocentric. What my brain did in that moment, it created a story about it. And the stories children's brain creates are always in the phrase of I or I'm. So in that moment, way back there in life and time, when that event took place, my brain said, I'm not good enough. It was a decision that it made. I'm not good enough. So my brain decides that I'm not good enough. And then my brain makes the decision that I'm not good enough. And then that decision goes into the unconscious part of the brain in what's called the hippocampus. Now that story is buried in my unconscious mind in the hippocampus. But I'm not dead. So I continue to go through life. And as I go through life over time, I'm experiencing more and more events. Well, what is my brain doing over time? It's actually gathering evidence. Over time, my brain gathers more and more evidence. Evidence for what? To prove that I'm right, that I'm not good enough. You see, it really wasn't the event. It's the story that your brain created back there in life and time to make sense of what happened. The problem is human development. It's an egocentric brain. So your brain never knew that, oh, that's my dad being messed up. Your brain doesn't think abstract. It thinks egocentric. So it had to be me. And so what ends up happening, it isn't really the event. We saw earlier, if it was the event, you can't heal. You'd have to go back in time and undo the event. And some people heal from events and some people don't. Why? Because some people recognize it was the story that your brain created about itself. And you still live in that story. So here's my point. Most people don't live their life in life. Most people don't live their life in life. Most people live their life in their head, watching life, living what we call past created futures. Past created futures. But before we go there, we have identified a number of stories that people have created, what their brains have told themselves to make sense. See which ones you resonate with. Again, my list is not exhaustible, all right? Here's some stories that people create. I'm unlovable. I'm not good enough. I'm weak. I don't matter. I'm bad. I'm a failure. I can't do anything right. I'm inadequate. I'm not desired. I have no value. I'm unworthy. I'm not perfect. I'm shameful. I'm not chosen. I'm ugly. I'm broken and unfixable. I'm a loser. I'm stupid or dumb. I'm not smart. I'm unacceptable. I'm not powerful. And there's other ones. You see, it's the story which is in the unconscious mind, in the hippocampus. And you're not living life in the moment. You're living life called past, created, future. Your story is the problem because your story is getting in the way of you seeing reality. Did you get that? It's getting in the way of seeing reality. And so you're going to have to deal with the story. But you have to identify the stories that your brain has at the unconscious level, and then you got to change the story. We'll get to that in a minute. All right? So then, again, I said most people don't live their life in life. Most people live their life in what we call past created futures. Now here you see a little child here in the foreground looking down the road of their life, and all they see down the road of their life is their what? Their story. The best way to think about a past created future is to think about an artist. When an artist paints a picture, before they paint the picture, where is the picture? Well, in their mind. It's in their head. They can see it. They can see the mountainscape. They can see the trees. They can see the valley and the creek. They got all the color schemes down. It's in their head. They know what it looks like. But it's not real in life and time yet. So if they want to take what they can see, which is only a possibility, and make it real out here in life and time, so you can hang it on a wall, you got to have three things for sure. Paint, paintbrushes, and a what? Canvas. Well, what's on the canvas when they start painting? Nothing. The canvas has to be blank. It has to be. Because if the canvas is already marked up, they can't paint what they see. Past creative futures is kind of the same thing. I can ask any one of you watching me right now, tell me the man you want to be. Tell me the woman you want to be. Tell me the Christian man you want to be. Tell me the Christian woman you want to be. Tell me the spouse you want to be. Tell me the parent you want to be. All of you can see in your mind the person that you want to be. Most people do. In the future, down there in the future, think of it this way. Here is a canvas of my tomorrow. And as I look on my mind, on the canvas of my tomorrow, seeing the Rick Marks that I want to be, moment by moment by moment, as I go into the future, seeing the man that I want to be, why is it most people don't reach it? It's because what they don't know is this. As I look onto the canvas of my tomorrow, seeing the Rick that I want to be, unconsciously, what I didn't know, was I would take my story that comes from the past, and I write it onto the canvas of my tomorrow, and unconsciously, I go, yeah, but I'm not good enough. Yeah, but I don't matter. Yeah, but I'm a failure. Yeah, but I'm unlovable. Yeah, but I have no value. And that's why people never heal and never really create for themselves and become the person they want to be. They're living what are called past created futures. Unconsciously, you're writing your story that your brain told you as a kid to make sense of what happened. Remember, it's development. It's egocentric. You didn't know that it was just your parents being messed up, their issues. That was my dad's issues. All I knew, egocentric thinking. This happened, I'm the blame. It's about me. And then you live that out day by day, moment by moment, into the future. And you never really create the relationships you want, achieve what you want. Why? You keep living out your story into the future day by day. So you're going to have to deal with your story. We'll come back to that in a minute. But there's one other thing you're going to have to battle. And that thing you have to battle, you can't get rid of until the day you die. That thing that you have to battle has been talking to you as you've been listening to me. That thing that you have to battle is the thing that disagrees with me, that wants to write me off, that wants to argue with me, that wants to be right and everybody else be wrong. What is it? It's that little voice in your head. We call it it. Now, what is it? It sits right back here in the back of your head. It will never come out here in life and in time to deal with things. What it does, it sits back here and it watches life and it judges and criticizes it. In other words, it's like the fans in a stadium. Now think about the fans in a stadium, right? They sit up here and down there is the field of court. Now the people up here, they think this way. That was a dumb play. Oh, come on, coach. I could have done better than that. I always want to say to those people, why don't you get your butt out of the seat, suit up, go down there on the field, get down there on the court. Tell me if you think the same way. You don't. 300-pounder coming at you. Make a decision. Ball just served 100 miles over the net. Do something. I'd rather sit up in the stands and watch life and judge and criticize it rather than get in life and engage it in a moment. You see, it is that part of your brain that sits right back here. It watches life and it thinks this way. That's true. That's false. Why would you do that? How come you did that? That's good. That's bad. What's the problem? You know, what's in it for me? What's in it for you? You should, you shouldn't. I trust, I distrust. Well, I did that because you did that because I did that in order to. You did that in order to. I agree, I disagree. I'm right, you're wrong. That's all it does. It sits in the back of your head and argues. Because here's the thing. If you'll notice the graphic, the back of her head, it only cares about two things, and two things only: looking good and avoiding looking bad. And I'm not looking bad. So if I do something to hurt you, I'm going to blame you for it. Well, I wouldn't have done that had you not done. That's it talking. It always keeps you immature. It will never allow you to realize your full potential. But the good thing is, you may be messed up and dysfunctional, but in the end, in your mind, you're not to blame. Everybody else is. But everybody else knows what you don't know. It is about you. You don't know how to live life in life. You keep listening to that dumb voice in your head. And that little voice in your head keeps going, see, you're not good enough. See, you don't matter. See, you're unlovable. That's all it's going to do. You're going to have to come to a place where you quit listening to that it voice. Now, what I refer to as it, the Bible refers to as the flesh. I just like using the word it. And folks, when it's talking, you got to tell it to shut up. Tell it to shut up. In my office where I counsel, we teach this with everybody that comes through. And I have a little troll doll in my office on the coffee table there. And once they learn about it, I got to tell it to shut up. Quit listening to that voice. Come out here. Talk to me out here. Get out of your head. Come out here. See, here's the thing about it. It cannot come out here. It's the flesh. It will always be right, and everybody else will always be wrong. It is not your friend. But you have to come to a place, you go, I ain't listening to it. Take a deep breath. Come out here and talk to people out here in life and in time. It will always keep you from living fully in the present. And guess where your power is? Out here in life and in time, in the present. That's where transformation takes place. It does not take place in your head listening to that dumb voice. So tell it to shut up, take a deep breath, and come out here. Now, you can't get rid of the it voice until you die. It's a part of our humanity. It's a part of the fallen nature, if you will. But you don't have to honor it, and you don't have to listen to it. That's a choice you get to make day by day, all right? Now, you can't get rid of the it voice, but you can learn to tell it to shut up and listen to it. Stories are different, though. Stories were what our brains told ourselves as children to make sense of what happened. What we didn't know was the stories then went into the hippocampus of the brain, which is unconscious to us. And we've been living past created futures ever since. So then, how do you deal with stories? The way you deal with stories is you have to come to question, one, you got to be able to identify the story. And once you understand that you have a story that says, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I'm inadequate, I'm weak, you never learn to question the story. So the question is there evidence that you probably are good enough? Is there evidence that you are lovable? Is there evidence that you do matter? Is there evidence that you're not a failure? You see, the truth sets you free. Living a lie, i.e. your stories that you told yourself as a kid to make sense of what happened, are lies. It's just your childhood understanding of what happened because you had an egocentric developmental brain. That's normal. It's it's the human development. But what if you were lovable? What if, in reality, out of your lifetime, you were good enough? What if, in reality, you weren't dumb and stupid, that you actually were smart? What if, in reality, the stories that we told ourselves as a kid out here in reality were really lies we told ourselves based on a childhood understanding of what happened? And is there any evidence to the contrary? And the answer is yes. The cross. You don't die for things you hate. You die for things you value. Part of the problem with the church in the West is we perpetuated what I call orphan thinking versus an orphan spirit versus a spirit of sonship. An orphan believes that they're daddy's son, but they still don't believe they're good enough. So they work harder, which is called legalism. Or they give up and rebel, which is what the prodigal son did. They still don't believe they're good enough. They don't believe that they're lovable. You see, in reality, the fact that the Heavenly Father sent his biological son to die on a cross on my behalf, on your behalf, what does that say about us? Well, it says we're good enough. It says that we matter. It says that I do have value. It says that I am loved and lovable. I do have a purpose. You see, when you go to the cross, all those stories that you told yourself as a kid to make sense of what happened, the cross declares are actually untrue. And here's what God taught me. Day by day, moment by moment, because I could be dead in 10 minutes. Life happens moment by moment by moment. I can be dead in 10 minutes. I wasted 10 minutes of good living because I chose to live out of the story that my brain told me as a kid rather than one that he declared over me from the foundation of the world and proved it on the cross. And then I realized I am good enough. I am lovable. I do matter. Not in an arrogant way, but in a humble way. And even if there wasn't a God, do I still matter? Am I still loved and lovable? Am I still good enough? The answer is yes. My wife thinks so. My kids think so. I got friends that think I do. They can't all be wrong either. Well, not everybody likes me. Yeah, that's called life. Not everybody likes Jesus either, so what? But it doesn't mean that I myself am unlovable. That I myself, I think you get the picture. Day by day, moment by moment, you get to decide from this moment forward. You want to live out of the stories that your brain told you as a kid to make sense of what happened? Or do you want to live out of the story that was declared over us from the foundation of the world and proved on the cross? You see, you get to choose the story you want to live by. The one you told yourself or the one that Christ has declared over us. That we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139. And in that same psalm, he says this, how marvelous are your thoughts of me. Not miserable, not derogatory, demeaning. How marvelous, wonderful are your thoughts of me, O Lord. They are so many, I can't count them as the grains of sand. Folks, the scripture even says he doesn't think those thoughts about you. As far as number as the grains of sand, and I don't know how much that is, what that number is, his thoughts are wondrous of me. Dare we believe it too? Since he said it is true of us? Not in arrogance, but in humility. So now I'm 63 years old, married 41 years. You ask me today, am I good enough? I would tell you yes. Do I matter? You bet I do. Am I loved and lovable? Yep. Am I adequate? Yep. Am I perfect? Nope, don't have to be. I'm human. Humans are imperfect. So then, are you loved and lovable? You bet. Do you matter? You bet. Are you good enough? Yes. Why? The cross says you are. And day by day, moment by moment, you get to decide how you want to live. Live out of the story that you told yourself or the one that the cross declares over you. Change the story to what is true of you. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. How marvelous are your thoughts of me, O Lord. There are so many, I can't count them as the grains of sand. Well, if his thoughts, wondrous thoughts, are as the number of the grains of sand, and I don't know what that number is, why are we choosing to stay in 10 or 12 negative stories that our brains told us about ourselves as kids when he doesn't even think those things about me? Give up those negative stories your brain told you and live in what is true about you, fully in the present. You are good enough and lovable. And by the way, even though the cross declares you are, there are people in your life who believe that true too about you. Just as much as there are people who believe that about me. The only thing you have to do is tell it to shut up. Quit listening to that voice. Go live free, fully in the present. The best version of who you are, because you are fearfully, wonderfully made. This is Dr. Rick Marks, and thanks for hanging in there.